name is Aline. My pronouns are she, her, and today we will be providing interpretation in Haitian Creole and Spanish with MARB language services to ensure that we can all have access to today's conversation in the language that we prefer. We also want to acknowledge the presence of our American Sign Language colleagues who are making this space even more accessible tonight. For those who can hear and prefer to listen in Haitian Creole or Spanish, we have devices on top of the stairs. One moment, please. On top of the stairs, if you would like to listen in either Haitian Creole or Spanish. For those of you watching on YouTube Live, you can also hear in Spanish or Haitian Creole in real time. Now I will be saying this in Haitian Creole. Bonsoir tout le monde, non moi c'est Aline, pronom moi c'est Li Poufi. Jodia avec collègue moyo avec MOB Language Services, nous pral bay nous interprétation en créole haïtien avec espagnol pour événement ça. Pour conversation ça de façon à ce que tout le monde attendait ça qui pral dire dans langage de préférence yo. Nous t'aimer reconnaître toute présence collègue nous yo avec un langage signe américain qui a fait espace encore plus accessible à souhait. Programme non jodi apprendre en anglais. Pour moun qui t'a préféré tendre en espagnol ou bien en créole haïtien, nous avons un petit appareil qui en haut escalier à sous bord droite nous que nous avons utilisé de façon à ce que nous attendons en direct en créole haïtien ou bien en espagnol. Si nous t'aimons que nous portions un petit appareil pour nous, s'il vous plaît, levez main nous. Si nous ne pouvons pas déplacer de chaise là, de façon à ce que nous puissions compter combien de monde qui a besoin d'appareil là pour nous capoter pour nous. Pour nous-mêmes qui regarder et session ça en direct la nous sur channel live PAMM, nous avons écouté conversation ça en créole si nous composons 305 901 2692. Numéro encore c'est 305 901 2692. Merci et bonne participation.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Melissa Nieto, soy parte del equipo de MARB Interpretation Services. Esta noche estamos aquí para anunciarles que la programación en la noche de hoy se ofrecerá en 3 lenguajes, esto siendo inglés, español y creol. Los servicios se ofrecen tanto en sala como en línea. Para las personas que quisieran obtener un equipo, pueden dirigirse a una de nosotras o a la parte superior izquierda. Para las personas que están conectadas en línea, pueden llamar al siguiente teléfono: 786-665-8802. Quisiéramos asimismo reconocer el trabajo de nuestros colegas Hard Hands, quienes proveen el servicio de interpretación del lenguaje a señas. Muchas gracias y disfruten.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Pérez Art Museum Miami. My name is Marie Vickles. I'm the Senior Director of Education here at the museum, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending tonight's public education program, and also to those of you that are joining us online via our YouTube channel. I'm delighted to welcome you to a very special Art and Soul talk featuring Pérez Art Museum Miami's Art and Soul honoree, Fab 5 Freddy. He will be in conversation with Franklin Sirmans, the Sandra and Tony Tamer director at PAMM. Across art, music, film, and television, Fab 5 Freddy's work has consistently dissolved boundaries between so-called high art and popular culture, creating space for Black creativity to be seen, heard, and valued on a global stage. His legacy is not only artistic, but deeply social, rooted in access, exchange, and cultural pride. Tonight, Fab 5 Freddy will share the history of his uniquely creative path and how he continues to find ways to stay inspired and create in his upcoming memoir, Everybody's Fly, A Life of Art, Music, and Changing the Culture. A few acknowledgements before I pass the mic. A special thank to our ambassadors for Black art, PAMM trustees, museum circle members, and all of our PAMM members at all levels of support. Whether you've been with us for years or this is your first visit, you are a part of a vibrant, creative community. Your support makes programs like this possible and helps us share diverse voices through art. For our future members, and you know who you are, I always say that, this is a perfect time to join. Membership starts at just $80 a year, that's less than $7 a month, and connects you with a passionate art community while helping us to keep art accessible for everyone. If you would like more information on how to become a member, please feel free to ask any of us here that you see working at the museum or stop by our visitor service desk for more info. And the gratitude continues with big thank yous going out to David Miller, Adult and Public Programs Manager, Natalie Fundora, our Education Coordinator, and our stellar audio-visual team, Andrew Bird on the boards tonight with Lazaro Yanes on video and camera, and Eleni Lecointe on our social media manager. And much thanks to all the departments here at PAMM, especially our frontline staff in visitor services, maintenance teams, and security teams. They help us so many ways to set up these programs, and we really could not do it without any of them. So let's give it up for them. Okay, now for just a little bit about our featured speakers. Fab 5 Freddy is a pioneering graffiti artist who became one of the first to exhibit his paintings internationally, helping ignite the street art movement. He gained notoriety in 1980 when he famously painted Warhol soup cans on a New York City subway, most effectively symbolizing the bridging of worlds so elemental to his own practice. He led the charge of early graffiti artists moving into galleries, giving birth to the street art movement. The original co-host of the groundbreaking show, Yo! MTV Raps, Fab 5 Freddy's work, woo, yeah. We gotta give it up for that. Fab 5 Freddy's work in film and television also includes co-producing, starring in, and composing music for the cult classic film Wild Style. That's right. Let's keep it going. He has directed music videos for numerous hip-hop stars, including Snoop Dogg, Nas, and Queen Latifah. His artwork was recently featured at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts in the exhibition Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip-Hop Generation. Currently, Fab 5 Freddy lives in Harlem, where he continues to make visual art, produce and direct projects for film and television, and leads the social equity cannabis brand he co-founded, Be Noble. Yeah, Fab is joined in conversation by Franklin Sirmans, the Sandra and Tony Tamer director here at PAMM. He has led the museum since fall of 2015 and has overseen the acquisition of more than 1,000 works of art by donation or purchase. Franklin has pursued his vision of PAMM as the People's Museum, representing a Miami lens. He has expanded the support for existing affiliate groups such as the PAMM Fund for Black Art and established the new International Women's Committee. Continuing his curatorial work at PAMM, Franklin organized the exhibitions Toba Kadori, co-curated the World's Game, Football, and Contemporary Art, and more recently organized Language and Image, Conceptual and Performance-Based Photography from the Jorge M. Pérez collection, among others. Before his role as a Sandra and Tony Tamer director at PAMM, Franklin served as the department head and curator of contemporary art at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, also known as LACMA. He also served as the artistic director of the 2014 Prospect New Orleans Biennial exhibition P3 Notes for Now. As a museum director, curator, and writer, Franklin is one of the leading voices in contemporary art, continuing to make an impact on the presentation and scholarship of some of the most premier and diverse voices in art. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Fab Five Freddy and Franklin Sirmans.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Friday night, ahead of a big weekend. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for supporting art. And we have an incredible human being to speak with this evening.
Thank you, Franklin.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us to honor you. I know we are preparing for the launch of your new memoir, but we're kicking it off here in Miami.
Here we go. A lifetime in the making.
And it's a hell of a lifetime.
Thank you. Man.
So I have to say, Marie got them all, but really, we have a special group of people around us tonight, and I think always on the staff side, on the board side, and I just want to acknowledge that. And it's a special thing that we're working with together here. So thank you all, and I know Andrew and Denise are holding it down on the audio up there, but Marie, David, thank you for bringing us here tonight. Laz, Ellie, Natalie, thank you guys. And thank you to our translators. Thank you guys. Fab, there it is. Yeah. So we could have done this book or no book, because it's an incredible life. And I think I should say that, shout out to Lisa Leone, who introduced us many moons ago. It's hard to believe. But we also had the chance to do an extensive interview for a book back in 1999.
That's when we met.
Right?
Yes.
And the thing is, we were talking about a lot of different things, but it was around this Basquiat exhibition, and I always was thinking, how do we put the focus solely on this incredible individual that, frankly, had such an important impact not only on my life but on so many people in so many different ways. The images will go by. The images tell stories unto themselves, but we're going to just touch on a little bit of this life for about 35 minutes before we open up to a few questions. But I'm struck by the image of being a college student in 1988, and we sat in front of the TV every day. I don't know what we had for class, but we were in front of the TV every day watching Yo MTV Raps. And it changed lives individually, collectively, around the world. But it's just one little piece, right? And so I say that to say that we could go in many different directions, but I think I'm interested in giving our audience a taste of the life. Before we all get the book, a taste of the life. You represent Harlem now. That is deep, deep, deep to our heart. but you're from BK.
Yes, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from Bedford-Stuyvesant, section of Brooklyn. Do or die.
What was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
Well, I like to tell people, I'm from a kind of a jazz household. My dad and Max Roach, the drummer, were childhood friends. And so when Max emerged as this leader of this whole new form of music, my dad was right there, really excited. And then as Max became prominent with Charlie Parker, Dizzy, Miles Davis, and all those guys, Thelonious Monk, they would come to Brooklyn, hang out with my dad and his friends in the early 50s. So I just grew up hearing his friends talk about all that stuff, how exciting it was. I inadvertently developed a taste for jazz. One of the things I remember being fascinated was how could these guys know who somebody is just from playing an instrument, not singing? How do they know, oh, that's so-and-so on sax, oh, that's so-and-so on the piano? And then I would later learn to do that myself because Thelonious Monk turned out to be the first musician I developed like a passion for. And then one of the stories I tell in the book, I was no more than 7 or 8. I'm looking through my father's phone book and there's Monk's name. So I call Monk's house and this woman answers the phone. This was Monk's wife, Nellie. And I'm like a little boy, you can imagine, right? She's like, oh, look at this little cute kid calling me. And I'm asking, can I speak to Monk, She says, well, he's resting now. But as the conversation continued in talking about jazz, she told me something that really stuck with me. She was like, particularly bebop, she said, jazz is like a conversation. And it begins with laying down, let's say, the premise of that conversation. And then the rest of the musicians are expounding with their interpretation. And that was like revelatory for me and something that I held close. So growing up in that jazz household, my dad was an accountant, but he was very open-minded. They were very much, him and his friends were very much into cannabis. They gathered at our house at least 4 or 5 days out of the week to discuss everything going on in the planet. Like African countries have been getting liberated, and they were very concerned about that and what was going on in the world. And jazz musicians, for the most part, were very progressive in terms of their thinking. Particularly, my dad was like the battery in Max's back regarding all the different issues going on, Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, and all of that. So that shaped me as a young kid to a certain extent.
It's interesting you led off on the political aspect of those conversations, but coming out of a creative space. And I guess that's something that you continue to mind. But as somebody at this point in the, let's say, 70s, how did you gravitate into art? How did you gravitate toward the idea of being a creative voice? And was it necessarily visual?
Well, I guess as most kids in school, when you get to make art, that's always a very fun thing to do, finger painting, whatever. That was always exciting. And then I guess I remember early on, some jazz albums would have art on the covers. I would later learn because of racism, they didn't want to put the musicians on some of the covers. And I just remember looking at certain albums that had kind of abstract art, and that was kind of had sort of an effect. The photography used on a lot of jazz albums, I would later realize affected my aesthetic appreciation of photography when I would just see an image in a secondhand photo record store, and I'd be like, oh, now I realize these were records that my parents had and I looked at as a kid. I actually ended up, unfortunately, destroying a lot of these records, trying to build things out of the albums, stack them up, and the records would roll out, and so part of my connection to music.
On the record cover, this cover of the book is inspired by that experience.
Yes, the cover of my book is inspired by a Blue Note. I think there were several albums that had this kind of composition. I think particularly one by John Coltrane, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's just, it was a reflection of where a lot of my aesthetic begins, with appreciating jazz. And then Max Roach was my godfather, And so I had a very close relationship with him, who would later be a huge supporter of hip hop. We actually did a performance together at a place in New York called The Kitchen, which was a place for performance artists to perform. And the guy that was the director came in to spice up the spot, had heard that Max and I had this connection, and he put the idea in Max's head, and he went crazy. I was terrified, because at that point, I wasn't trying to be a rapper. I just had a few rhymes to get on a mic at a block party so the girls would, you know, try to say a little something. That's what it was all about. Like, you know, I'm gonna keep it 100. But Max wanted me to, yeah, man, because he was like Miles, which I later learned a lot more about their connection. Were very much into going into new spaces, music, sound, etc. I like to point out the last record Miles Davis recorded that was released posthumously was a hip-hop jazz record called Doo-Bop. And Max would have wanted to do the same thing, but I wasn't that guy, but we did have a performance at The Kitchen. They filmed it, and so, yeah.
So by 1979, just to give us a moment in time, because we do have a painting that has cycled through from that time period. You're painting on canvas at that point. Tell us about that moment a little bit.
Okay, so I guess at some point as a young kid, I discover this guy, Andy Warhol. I see a weird ad for some product. It was in the Sunday Times magazine, and it was an illustration of all these people on a plane, and there was Miles Davis, Muhammad Ali, some people I recognized. I was like, yo, who's this guy with the white blonde hair? So he first hit my radar then I learned a little bit about him with the soup cans and what pop art was about. I guess I had done graffiti like most teens were doing at that time. I like to describe it as an adolescent teenage activity. It wasn't really everybody was trying to be an artist. We just wanted to put our marks down. But out of that, it developed into a form of expression that I then was like, wait a minute, this is very much like we were mimicking what was on soapboxes, what was covers of comic books, as graffiti really developed. And I began to make a connection, which led me to seek out probably one of the most incredible graffiti artists in existence at the time, a guy by the name of Lee Quinones. And I had these ideas like, listen, we can take this from the trains into the art world and, you know, represent ourselves in that capacity.
But that's the crazy thing. So even at that point, you're like in your early 20s. So
I was like a late teen. It was, 79-ish, yeah.
that kind of...
It's all good. I've been around, baby. I'm here, God damn it.
I mean, but that kind of ambition, I guess, that kind of thought that stems from having an experience around the kind of jazz heroes that
yes.
you mentioned.
And one of the things that always, listen to my dad and his friends talk all the time, and how they were treated much better as artists in Europe for the most part. These are things that resonated. And so I guess I developed a certain, way of thinking that was like, well, let me just give this a try, and I didn't realize how inspired I was until a lot later as a young adult, how much these experiences rubbed off on me. But basically, along with that in '79, along with reaching out to Lee, I was looking at the development of punk rock and new wave culture. And I'm reading some articles. In fact, luckily, my dad had subscriptions to a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember a page 2 story in the New York Times about the Sex Pistols and the Clash and this really radical, disruptive form of rock and roll that was challenging what rock and roll had been. I mean, it was really scaring a lot of people, and I liked that right away. And as I began to read about these people and these artists, some of them were like, we don't even know how to play our instruments, man. We're just doing this. And I was like, wow. I was like, these guys are interesting because I'm now formulating an idea about these other things, not just the graffiti painting that was going on, but this new music that was developing in the Bronx, we would later know as hip hop, the breakdancing. I had seen an article in my dad's stuff, and that said basically for a culture to be complete, it should have an art, a music, and a form of dance. So I was like, oh wait, okay, there's this music, there's this kind of dancing, there's this visual art. I had this whole story. I made my way to the downtown scene in New York, began to meet people like Glenn O'Brien, like Chris and Debbie from Blondie. I ran all these ideas down to them, and they loved it. And they took me under their wing, and Glenn advised me, well, you need to get some exposure now. These ideas are great. And the Village Voice wrote up a little item on me and Lee that we were ready to sell our work for $5 a square foot. We would come in and do a mural in your house or whatever. And an art dealer from a gallery, a very prestigious gallery in Rome, Galleria La Medusa, he represented the De Chirico estate at the time, reached out and offered me and Lee a show. And so it began.
That's crazy. But that's before the cans on the subway.
Yeah, the cans on the subway, I've been thinking about it. When I connected with Lee, I shared a lot of these ideas. He got it. I explained. I showed him what pop art looked like. He saw that they were clearly looking at comics and advertising, things that we were looking at as graffiti kids, trying to make our names bigger and brighter. And it was all formulating around that time. And so I thought, wow, Andy was such a symbolic idea. I thought about doing a homage to him to let people see, because all the press about young Black and Latinos for any reason was always negative, especially if you had a little street swagger about yourself. And they just painted us with a very negative brush. And I thought, well, I wanted to change the perception of that as well, which was motivating some of the moves I was making.
I mean, it's two interesting things that are happening in that moment, or more than a couple. But the fact that, you know, you talk about coming into graffiti itself as being a means of expressing oneself. I mean, it's just everybody doing it, right? Yeah. But then you took it to the next level of actually doing it on canvas. The idea that you then were talking to Lee about it and thinking, how can we do something more with this? Yeah. But to be so intentional to take the Warhol soup can specifically, which opens up a whole other conversation. Yeah. And then within that, and I think what gets lost, even for me, is the fact that you said on those cans on one side, Dada, Fabulous. I mean, it's like Futurist. A manifesto in a way, right? Futurist.
Yes. So along with learning about art and Andy Warhol, I started learning about these other European movements in art, the Dadaists, the Futurists, which all seem really radical. They were going against the established culture at that time, and I dug that. And so I thought of them as similar to graffiti crews, which were, I said, these guys are like crews with their whole point of view. And so that was all, you know, me deep into making these comparisons and connections. So when I would try to explain to people what we were doing, I would be referencing this kind of stuff. A lot of people would be blown away. What? Like, you really know about art? Like, I'm 19, 20, and I'm really immersed in this stuff. And so people, like, responded. And so the idea was to show that I remember just wondering, man, imagine some curator from the Whitney or the MoMA seeing that train come into the station. We did two versions of it. The first one got buffed really quickly. This was the second version. They would take the windows out, but some people in the MTA, that's the Mass Transit Association, liked the train, because the train ran for 2 or 3 years, which was unheard of back then. So the word got out, the message was felt, and people, and as another thing that I was kind of, because of the experience of having a real show in Europe, and then filtering out to other graffiti people, people were excited, like, who are these guys? How did they pull this off? And we were very conscious about opening the doors for other people. I had kind of met Jean-Michel right around that time. He was beyond excited that we had did this. And together we would talk about this, and people thought, oh, did you and Jean-Michel do all the graffiti in New York City? It was like, oh no, there's thousands of people doing it. And so Jean and I wanted to open the door for more of us to get in, which I kind of led that, bringing people like Ramel Z, to the table, Futura 2000, because I had made all the kind of pioneering moves and then wanted to introduce other people so they can get on as well, which happened. The Fun Gallery was a gallery that opened to pretty much show a lot of our work. Tande, Futura.
Fun Gallery was Patty Astor, right?
Yes, in the Lower East Side. That was the first gallery in the East Village, which turned into like a big scene. There was more than 70 galleries in a short period of time following what we did.
But that idea of collaboration is something that is in that moment, and it's one thing I think to bring people together. But I got to touch on, you did an exhibition though, as a curator in 1981 called Beyond Words.
Yeah. So as the scene was beginning to develop, other graffiti writers are coming to the table. We all hanging out with each other, trying to make moves. The club scene in New York was a really important fertile ground for development, and the Mud Club was this new club that had opened that, I got, early access and was connected with all the people that ran it. And the owner of the club was hearing things we were doing, and he had opened up another floor and said, man, I wanted you to curate. In fact, I met Keith Haring around that time as well, and we became tight. And Keith was working at the Mud Club, basically cleaning up. Then they asked Keith to curate a show, and boom, Keith said, Steve Mass wants you to do a show, which became this show here. I called it Beyond Words because I wanted to represent, the subtitle of the show was Graffiti Based, Rooted, and Inspired. So it was not just classic graffiti artists, but there were other people that were from other forms of art. And that was sort of a sensation. Then the entertainment for that show, I'm also we're in pre-production on what becomes hip-hop's first film, Wild Style, which was another idea that grew out of something, that became a reality. And so we had some of the best groups in hip-hop come and perform at the Mud Club. And that was the first time people on the downtown scene got a peek at this new culture.
Yeah. The reason why I want to go so deep in that moment is because it feels so, there's a sense of optimism that we all need right now. And the idea, like you talk about bringing different people together, but if you look at that Beyond Words poster of just a quick glance, you notice like they're not all even writers, they're not all painters. There are photographers there who you recognize are going to actually carry the image forward pre-social media, right? We had the photographs. Yeah. It's crazy, the collaborative aspect of it, and the fact that it happened in the club makes it into this a different kind of terrain, right? Some of you were going to school, academic, SVA was probably a component of conversation, I know, for a few people, but you were constantly driving between these spaces of music, of fashion, of art that I think begins in that moment and takes us into this Blondie Rapture is probably the same year, I think.
Yeah, that's so true. It's amazing when you look back how much stuff was happening in such a short period of time. It's really remarkable. Not just that, but all the various types of music that were going on at one time. It was an extremely special period of time. And so meeting Chris and Debbie, which were the nucleus of the group Blondie, which was the biggest out of that whole new wave scene, I'm constantly running all this stuff down like I'm sharing with you guys. And they were totally with it and giving me advice on how to move forward and things we could do. So I'm turning them on to these early underground hip-hop tapes from these clubs. There were no real records happening yet at this time. Rappers Delight hadn't really happened. And so they really liked it. I organized a trip for a bunch of these friends. I took them up to the Bronx to see it happen raw and live. I was blown away how much they got it and then went and made a song called Rapture. And the wild story for me is, I love sharing, they had come back from Cali, being in Cali for a couple of months recording a new album, and they invited me to the house to play me some of the songs. So they played me a few tracks, and then they go, okay, here's something special. And they play Rapture, which starts off with Debbie Harry singing, then it breaks into this rap. I totally thought they had just did this as a goof in the studio because I'm like, come on, they're not putting this out as a record. But to show me that they really understood all the stuff I was telling them, they did a little version just to share with me, and I was blown away by that. It was just the sweetest thing. A month later, I'm in I'm in Europe for the second art show after the show in Rome. This is like a year or so later. And I'm in a cab in Paris with two members of the Talking Heads, I have to point out. And I get into the cab and I hear this song. And I'm thinking like, yo, how does this guy have this copy of this song? I'm thinking, this is just a cassette. Like, and Chris France, who was the other guy from the Talking Heads, he's like, no, Freddie, that's from the new Blondie album. That's the new single. I'm like, that's how I got to realize that that was a real record, which would go on to be #1. And the rest is kind of history.
It's crazy, and we don't even have to talk about the video, which is you, Lee.
Yeah, Jean-Michel. So, other good story about the Rapture video is, of course, we're researching Wild Style, so I'm meeting all the Bronx rappers now to get them lined up to be in the film. So, of course, Grandmaster Flash is the most incredible, outstanding, phenomenal thing on the DJ scene, and I'm like, I ran all this down. Flash is fast. He's the fastest. There's fly guys and there's fly girls. You know the slang and whatever. And so I said, for the video, let's get Flash to do his little thing. So I called Flash up and said, man, I'm cool with these people. This record just came out. They like mention you on the record. They shout me out. Flash is like, okay, I'm gonna be there. Flash doesn't show up. But Jean-Michel is there and all the other folks that we hung out with. So I said, Debbie, look, we can have Jean do it. I'll show him how to fake being a DJ. I says, yo, Jean, you just do this with the record, move the crossfader. Nobody had ever seen this stuff before. You're not supposed to put your hands on a record. Keep in mind, so Debbie's like, okay. So when the song happens, Jean just stands there with a grin on his face, and I'm like, oh, shit, whatever. And then it goes into this whole, like, fake street scene. Me and Lee are doing graffiti pieces, and all the other people are friends we hung out with, and that's the Rapture video.
It's absolutely incredible. It's crazy, and it's also a reminder of how much things are about to change in terms of the way that we consume art, the way that we consume music, and the importance of the image, right? This is one of the first big crossover hits in some way on MTV.
Yeah, and not only that, it was perfectly said, because when MTV begins, it's literally one of the first videos that they have to actually play. And later, when I would end up on that channel, that was one of the things the producers would say, yo, we gotta do something. And this is the guy who we think should host. And by the way, he's mentioned in the Rapture video,
Crazy.
Blah, 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 and then, you know.
So you mentioned it a couple times, Wild Style, 1983.
Yeah.
Damn, I don't know what
Yeah,
to say.
once again, so great story. So there's this big art show that happens. It was on the cover of the Village Voice, and the headline is the first radical art show of the 80s. It was 1980. So being somewhat of an art nerd, I know about the Armory show of 1913, and just something about this article was like, I know it's the beginning of a new decade, so shit is about to happen, different stuff. The 70s in art had been conceptual, kind of boring in terms of my taste, so I studied up on all that. I knew that was kind of like you needed a degree in art to understand any of the stuff, and so I knew something different was about to happen. And the way this headline, John Ahern was holding one of his busts, and the curator, rest in peace, Diego Cortez, I had recently met, and I was like, yo, what's up? He's like, oh, I know those people. They're called Collab. They're having an event like that first week. I go to this event, and in thinking about the fact that we should make a film, like one of those underground art films, hanging out with Lee in a way to present us in a more, so people could understand us in a better light, change the narrative, control the narrative, if you will. Hanging out with Lee in his neighborhood, which is the Smith Projects in the Lower East Side, right by the base of the Brooklyn Bridge. A couple of times I had seen a poster up on the wall for a film. It was called The Deadly Art of Survival. And there's a black guy standing behind a chain link fence with blood on his face. And looking at that poster, I was like, yo, this is one of them underground films I know. So I remembered it. Lee said, oh, the guy in the poster, he's a local karate teacher who lives in the neighborhood. It's a black dude named Nathan Ingram. Okay, jump cut. I'm at the Times Square show with Diego Cortez. Art is everywhere. The ceiling, the floor. I'm like, shit was wild. It was in Midtown in a well, formerly a massage parlor, which really was another name for a whorehouse back then. Used to be everywhere in Times Square in New York. The owner of this building cleaned it all out and gave it to this group of artists to do this wild art exhibition. I go to the exhibit and there's this poster. I go, yo, Diego, that poster. He goes, oh, the guy who made that film is Charlie Ahern, the brother of John, the identical twin. I walk right up to Charlie, he introduces me, and I pitch him this idea for what becomes Wild Style. And he was with it, and we began to go ahead and make this film.
Truly, truly a classic.
Wild scene.
I mean, one of the things in that film, and like you talk about bringing people together. We're doing that. You're collaborating, but you do address some interesting topics within the film. I mean, it is somewhat about how this new thing is happening and the galleries. I think there's a scene where like you're in a living room and there's a gallerist, and the gallerist is kind of not necessarily getting the work, but trying to.
That's Glenn O'Brien who plays. So Glenn O'Brien, amazing. My mentor, he plays the head of the Whitley Museum, who pretty much brushes off. The place, we filmed this in this woman's place who literally was a serious collector. She was really cool. Her name was Neva Kislak, who literally had she had Frank Stella, Lichtenstein, like in her apartment. She was a super duper friend of the arts. So we shoot this scene in her apartment. And it was just life imitates art quite a bit in Wild Style. The premise that we came up with for the film was that we would use all the real graffiti writers, breakdancers, rappers to pretty much play themselves. Everybody else was pretty much close to what they did. I'm one of the few people really kind of acting, if you will, because I'm from Brooklyn. Most people think I'm from the Bronx because I played that character. And Lee plays himself, for the most part, a graffiti writer named Zorro, who's staying under the radar and doesn't really want to reveal himself. This was a big inspiration to what Banksy does, because Banksy was doing classic graffiti before he figured out the stencil thing, and I'm told was very inspired by Lee's character in the film, which was, wow, super cool.
Yeah. From there, I mean, you're making paintings, you're doing the thing, you got the film thing going on. I mean, we're going forward a couple of years, but how do you come to MTV?
Yeah, so I'm exhibiting, Fun Gallery, the shows are happening. Jean-Michel's rocket is taking off. It was a really amazing period in a relatively short period of time when you look back. Once again, the question?
Incredibly short period of time. Yeah. But I'm thinking in between those years, how you got to MTV.
So MTV is this new thing. It's bubbling, it's developing, it's becoming like a real force. Of course, I get very few friends have cable at that time. That's a serious luxury, and only Manhattan is wired for the most part for cable. So, but there's a guy that hangs around on the scene I'm connected with who gets a gig as a producer there. His name was Peter Doherty, and Peter was really tapped into all the cool stuff that had been going on. He's a producer now on the channel, and he's telling the MTV execs, listen, man, this stuff is blowing up. Records are going gold. No marketing, no promotion. We need to jump on this. LL Cool J, Run DMC, like things are really happening. So he's in their ear, and they go, he's the guy that should host this show. And he's coming at me, telling me, I'm like, get out of here, man. I remember sitting in somebody's place all day to watch a Michael Jackson video or maybe Doves Cry and be like, who's this fucking guy hosting the show? Get out of the way, like play. You know how MTV back in the days, it was like, this is whack, man. So that was my impression of it, basically. These VJs would do like 2-3 hour stretches with a green screen with kooky stuff going on. So Peter, and then he hooks up with this other guy named Ted Demme, who was the nephew of Jonathan Demme, and they were both championing trying to get a show on the air. And Peter eventually says, man, listen, I think this is going to happen. Want to shoot. He says, how would you want to do this if we can do this? And I said, well, damn, well, I don't want to be like those other VJs, cooped up in the studio with the goofy stuff on the green screen happening. I said, I would feel more comfortable being on the street, like being out on the avenue where people are and where the music really kind of generates from. Yeah. He says, okay, so we shot a pilot. We go on the Manhattan side of the Williamsburg Bridge. We stand there with the skyline, the buildings behind us. I fake introducing a Run DMC video, whatever. And I go, well, I'm going to put myself in my Wild Style character because I want to add, I never intended to be on screen for any of this shit. We had cast all the characters in Wild Style except this character, Fade, who's the link between the graffiti scene and the rap scene. And we can't find this character. We're like a few weeks away from shooting, and Charlie like talks me into, and the thing that with the extra few $100 I'd get a week, I'd be able to get my own apartment. And I used to be kind of envious, like at the end of all this fun, 3:30, 4:30, you're waiting for the A train to go home to Brooklyn, which was like a nightmare. And Jean-Michel didn't have his own crib yet. He was couch surfing here and there, but I was kind of envious, man. I wish I had my own pad. And so the extra money, I'm like, shit, I can get my own apartment. Okay, I'll play this character. And that was the character that I leaned on for my Yo MTV Raps, like persona, kind of real street. I guess I'm both, you know, I'm be super nerdy, but I'm real ghetto at the same goddamn time, baby, you know? I turn it off and on like that. It's me, it's how I grew up. And so, Your MTV Raps, it happens, and it's crazy because it becomes the highest rated show on the channel. I'm like shocked, because most of my friends don't have it. So it's like a weird thing that happens where become like really well known in all these other places around the country, which was surreal to deal with.
Incredible. No, we had one image that went by of you and De La Soul, and we have one image that went by with Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah, those are some moments from Your MTV Raps. It's crazy how that happened.
But that was one of the, and I paused there because there's an East Coast thing that's happening there. I think there's a comfortability for you in starting off the show. You mentioned Run DMC, that was on the first show. Yeah. Will Smith was on the first show. Yeah. And you also went hardcore because you had Eric B. and Rakim on the first show.
Oh yeah, Eric B. and Rakim, no question. There was game.
That's a hell of a mix. Like, we can't even imagine hearing that now.
It was phenomenal that this was happening, going into people's living rooms at that time. So also what's happening for me, the art thing was going great. I was excited. But essentially, you'd be in a few group shows and a solo, maybe one solo show a year. And I loved it and still love making art. But I'm like, man, I wanted more. And so the idea came, having done Wild Style, that was film school for me. And I wanted to direct a music video even before MTV had happened. Because when I first heard Public Enemy's music, I lost my mind. It reminded me a lot of my dad and the things they were into and the things they were reading about and discussing. So when I first heard the first Public Enemy record, you know, I was like, I knew, and I began to campaign. I wrote concepts for about half that first album, would hang out in the studio trying to convince them. But Chuck later would tell me, yo, a low-budget music video then was $30K. Chuck said, we spent that on the whole first album. They couldn't justify that on a music video because MTV, a national outlet, hadn't happened yet. So what did happen was the people that ran Jive Records, this is once again, right before Your MTV Raps happens, they asked me to direct the first video for KRS-One, a song called My Philosophy. And a lot of the aesthetics that I put in that were what I wanted to do for Public Enemy, like the black and white footage. There's even images of Malcolm and Farrakhan in that video for KRS-One. And then I had another outlet to express myself along with painting. I was now beginning to make music videos, and then Your MTV Raps hit, and that video would be one of the first that would air, which I couldn't believe MTV even played it. You know, I was like, what?
Yeah.
There was a lot going on in that time.
So you did that, and then what it's interesting in some of the images that we had was that there's a West Coast turn, heavy.
Yeah, this is what was amazing. So I knew doing the show, you know, I'm New Yorker, all about them lyrics, that's me, but I knew as we are now being exposed nationally, I was going to have to see what else was going on. We'd heard a little bit about Luke here in Miami. In fact, it was Luke Skywalker and the 2 Live Crew, if you remember. We knew they were making some noise. We'd heard about the scene in Philly. Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince was bubbling. So I knew I was going to have to, being that we were a national show, we were going to travel and see what these other scenes were, which we did. And then literally, when Eazy-E had stuff out first, in which we showed his videos on the show. And when I go to LA, Eazy's like, well, I have this whole group. The group is NWA. So we go to the Welcome to Compton sign. But I never forget the night before getting a memo from the producer, Ted, that we can't wear nothing red and nothing blue. I didn't know anything about this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, okay, no problem. I got a cool black outfit. And I put that together, and that was the introduction of Your MTV Raps. Introduction of NWA, I'm sorry, on Your MTV Raps. And bang.
Just everybody in the video is wearing completely black, and
Yes.
you have on a little bit of black and white.
I remember standing at the Welcome to Compton sign, and these dudes drove by in like a 64 Impala, whatever. And they were at a light right near where we won. The dudes were looking. And I'm like, hey, what up, bro? And then, Pete, Ice Cube says, hey, Fab, listen, man, I know, that's how y'all do it. But out here, you got to do it like this. And he was explaining, like, this is a gang sign. I was like, what do you... Later, I would learn and understand what all of that was about. But that was a thing I remember from that first episode.
Amazing.
Getting a little instructions now.
One of the videos, you also did Snoop Dogg's first big song.
So as Your MTV Raps happens now, I get to direct a lot of videos because I'm meeting the artists. When I chat with them about their videos, they've seen other things I've done. The relationship I developed with Dr. Dre at that time was really strong because that was their first exposure. So when he's about to introduce this new artist, he asked me to come out and do the video, which was Snoop's first video for the song What's My Name. Dre was like, I want to do something funny. There were other songs that we heard, like Gin and Juice. Of the 3 songs that were definite at that time, I was like, oh my God, dude, let me get this Gin and Juice. He's like, nah, Fab, I'm gonna do that later, but I really want his first song to be this, and I want the video to have a sense of humor. He was thinking about animation. Michael Jackson had recently did the black or white video with the first time you saw morphing. I was like, that shit was crazy. Michael had, million plus. So I had recently met a guy named Jaron Lanier, who's one of the inventors of virtual reality. He's like a don in the game. And I had recently met him, so I reached out because I said, Jaron knows guys at that level. Maybe he'll know somebody that would work with me at a more affordable level, and he did. And those were the guys that did the morphs of I turned Snoop and the Dog Pound into dogs. And the great thing about that, ironically, the video, I wish I could remember the name of the video, the special effects guys that I used, the graphic effects guys, had actually done the animation in the Atomic Dog video for George Clinton, which has a little bit of animation. And when they listened to the song, they were like, wait a minute, because that's Snoop's What's My Name is based on Atomic Dog. He says, yo, we did the animation for that. I was like, oh man, this is perfect. So those guys did the morphs for me at a very affordable number.
Incredibly memorable images.
Yeah, it's really special.
But you also come back to the painting. I just want to touch on that.
Painting. These are some works I've done more recently where I've created, these were 3 hip-hop pioneers on the turntables. There's some other images you've seen of Jack Johnson, who's a hero of mine, and I created these images of Jack and put a bunch of crystals all over the stuff, and that's a whole series I've done. And then some other work I've done more recently, which you might see pop up here, these black pirates. I'm obsessed with the fact that there were black pirates. Of the hundreds of pirate films made, you would never know that a third of the pirates during that Pirates of the Caribbean period were of African descent, because a lot of pirates, not all, but some pirates were against the monarchy, and they split the booty equally, like all for one and one for all was legit. It was almost a sense of democracy before that had actually been implemented. So I've done research. I've been fascinated by the fact that there were black pirates. When going to Jamaica, where I've gone many times, I heard about Port Royal, and this is where pirates went to spend the money after stealing and taking stuff. And I learned and done deep research. So I'm developing this as a theatrical project, as well as a lot more paintings are going to be made. These works you see here were exhibited at the Saatchi Gallery, a big show like 3 years ago. But I had to stop all of that to focus on the memoir. But I'm back on my black pirates. Soon.
Thank you, man. I mean, this is where we are. We're a month away from the memoir.
March 10th. This is like the first, in a sense, this is perfect timing once again. It's sort of like the beginning of the book promo tour, which I'll officially go out on. I'm going to do the Drink Champs podcast while I'm here, which is a real popular hip-hop podcast. And if you guys, New Yorker readers, next week, Talk of the Town, there's a piece on me. There's a bunch of stuff coming together. So I'm trying to sell some books and tell these stories. You guys are the first to get a inside snapshot of things I elaborate on.
The New Yorker, 1991, called this man the coolest man in New York.
Wow. Yeah, Franklin, you know it all, boy. That's
Come on,
crazy.
man.
That's great. Yeah, Susan Arlene profiled me in 1991, 17 pages. It was crazy. So Susan, I got her to give me a blurb for the back cover, which was very nice of her. And Richard Prince gave me some love. Nas, RZA. I got a nice array of people giving me some nice accolades for the pages.
Can't wait to read the book.
Everybody's fly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Franklin,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Wow. Wow.
Take a couple questions if we have.
Hell yeah.
Wait, sorry. Oh, sorry. Got the mic.
Mike.
The mic will come.
Okay. I'm a fellow New Yorker, Bed-Stuy neighbor, Macon Street, 7 years, so great to have you here. I'm curious, where do you find art now? Like New York City, where would you say it's nestled in? Miami, Paris, like these are obviously art cities, but where are you finding it today?
Well, you know, art, obviously, like so much of everything is online, and occasionally I'll see something, and then I'll look at the artist, I'll see something across my timeline, and then I'll look at his page, and I'll see lots of art. If I like it, I DM. You know, it's amazing how people respond to DMs. Obviously, they see who you are, and I'll just say, yo, man, dope work, or what's up, and they'll respond right away, and I want to see your studio, I want to get something. So that is a big way. I haven't been physically going to a lot of art spaces, galleries, museums, etc. Lately, not a lot. I love doing that, though. You know, another important thing for me, which we didn't mention, which was really develop my aesthetics. When I was really young, I would cut school and explore the museums of New York City. I would go on these adventures. So I would go to the Metropolitan, which I loved the most. It was like Disneyland for me as a kid, and get really familiar with all different genres of art. I would go to the Cloisters, to the Whitney, to the Frick. So that helped me get familiar, to stand in front of incredibly important works of art, and then later see them in books. I'd be like, yo, this is incredible. I stood right in front of that piece. So later, when me and Jean-Michel become good friends, a part of what made us good friends was he had childhood museum experiences like that as well. And he knew about all these painters I knew about. So you know when you meet somebody like that, you're in sync. And because I ran with hood cats in Bed-Stuy, I wasn't trying to be like, oh, by the way, Andy Warhol. I'd be like, nigga, what? Who? So, but Jean knew, like, oh my God, I like Jasper Johns, man. I'm like, yo, I like Rauschenberg, and we immediately, like, dude. So one of the things that me and Jean did was we said, yo, man, let's start a museum club. Basically on Wednesdays when we had time, we would both spend a day at the Met, mostly, and then have a good lunch there, and we'd sometimes act like we were art students with a sketchbook. And so that was a big part of me developing my aesthetics, and I talk about that in my book. That's awesome. Yeah.
So like in the neighborhood, you'd always have the one kid that was the best athlete, right? That never makes it out of the neighborhood, right? So in music, who would you say would be somebody like a Bernard Wright or an MC Ren or somebody that just never blew up? Like that, who's the best entertainer that you saw that never made it?
Man, you know what? I would need some time, but there are unfortunately too many. And it really is a reflection of how chance so much of this is. Like right place, right time, when the lightning strikes, you know, you can't call it. I'll tell you a great story. When Eric B had heard about this cat out on Long Island, and he went to meet this cat to be down with him to be a rapper. That cat was a rapper named Freddie Fox. But the story Freddie tells is he wasn't there that day when the cats were taking Eric B to meet Freddie Fox. So the kid that was taking him says, yeah, Freddie Fox is not here. But there's this other kid over here who's mad nice. His name is Rakim. So Eric B goes and, to check this cat out, and you know how the adage goes, the rest is history. And Freddie Fox was mad nice. He did his thing, but like, that's how Rakim got on. So those things happen on the good side and the bad side, and the game is littered with those kind of stories. Yeah.
Hi. It seems like you spent a lot of your life architecting new collaborations and connections that hadn't existed before. Is there a mantra that you use to push through fear or hesitation that you have when you're doing something new or for the first time?
Well, not overly. It's just really like determined to get it done. And the whole connection that inadvertently happened with a lot of people in a lot of forces, like I wasn't seeing it. It was just a way to get things done. And I kind of had a sense that if I can get with this person, that would help. And they might listen and get some advice or some instruction in terms of the initial early stage of it all. But yeah, I mean, I'm determined, man. It's just, it's like I gotta get it done. Like there's no excuse. There's nothing else except getting it done. When I'm on it like that, it's like, that's it. And I'm gonna find a way, Like Jean and I used to say, I remember there's so much things in common. I remember I bought that poster of Malcolm X, By Any Means Necessary, and then I went by Jean's studio and he had it. And so that was a little mantra we would kind of jokingly, by any means necessary. I'd be like, ah. So that was that.
We're going right down here.
Yeah, one more or two.
Hey, Fab.
Hey,
so in 1988, I'm in Jamaica, where I'm from.
Yes.
And there was a countdown to your show. And I remember sitting in my parents' video pit. It was a video pit. That's another story. And waiting on this show to happen. And I was like in front of this television, and there you were. I saw the first show because we had a satellite dish in Kingston, Jamaica, and we had to put it on G1. So it was like, and there you were with all of the fabulousness.
Yes.
And I wonder, did you have any idea how globally relevant you were in that moment?
I'm so glad you said that, because the first trip to Jamaica is working with Your MTV Raps, right? Luckily, one of the bigger producers, Doug Herzog, Bob Marley to him was like Elvis to a lot of white guys from that generation, like locked in. So when the idea came for us to go to Jamaica to cover this close cousin to rap, I was super excited, because I grew up in Brooklyn. I heard, Dillinger. I mean, I'm mess with dancehall hard. You Roy, I Roy, the whole shit. Trust me, I've been there. I remember the posses in Brooklyn. I was around all that crazy energy. So go to Jamaica. Unfortunately, they put us in this really kind of weird spot, which gave it up for free. Hedonism. Hey, what's going on here? If y'all know, you know. I'm like, so the thing that really turned me off was I grew up with all kind of West Indian flavor. I'm like, yo, first day, I'm like, I want to go get some rice and peas and some fish. They're like, oh, sorry, we don't recommend you do that. We serve Caribbean on Wednesday. I'm like, what? I'm trying to figure this joint out. This is the whole like all-inclusive nonsense. So one of the acts we were interviewing, I was going to interview, which came from Kingston on a bus, was the whole Marley family, Ziggy and the crew. So when they get off the bus, I'm like, wow, Ziggy Marley, Steven. They were like, Fab, mom, yo, mama, brother, yo. They basically knew. I'm like, how do y'all know? I said, on the dish, we had a dish. Now the satellite dishes was like 12 feet back then. Shit was crazy. I said, what? So that was a part of that, and I would later direct a video for them, the video All Love, which Rita used to be so happy because I got Ziggy and them to put on a jacket. They were like, Fab, man, couldn't get them to put on the jacket. And so I got tight with those guys, and that was my first time immersing myself in the dance hall scene. Then we would go and cover Sunsplash, and then I first see Shaba land from the helicopter dance hall night. I'm directing a bunch of videos, and I'm like, oh my God, directing for this guy is going to be different. Nobody R&B looked like him. So I directed like most of Shaba's videos. Like the first was Trailer Load, Mr. Lover Man, Slow and Sexy with him and Johnny Gill, Muscle Grip. What do you mean? What? That was my guy. Yes. Yeah, that was fun. Love Jamaica bad, for real.
Yo, Fab, unique. So I have two questions for you.
Oh, unique, I
have two questions for you. I'm from New York, as you know, downtown Seoul. How come you never, have you ever eaten Asian food before?
Yes.
You have?
C'est passé, baby.
Okay, good. And so my last question for you now. What is the difference between New York then, like, the East Village, and New York now?
Oh, man. It's night and day. It's no comparison, man. If you were there then, everything completely different. It's unfortunate. I think the biggest thing, though, unique, and you was there, it's the price of everything is what drove. A lot of where we lived then was based on affordability. Like you could literally, the apartments we had were from 3, 5, 6. If you was paying more than $600 a month, it was crazy back then. And that's really how you could live. And then if you were trying to do something creative, you could work 2-3 days a week doing whatever, and then the rest of the time you can focus on trying to get it popping. That was that world, that was that time. And all those real creatives, as it got crazy, and as the real estate people, I was just chatting with some ladies that were very aware that all those real creatives couldn't afford anything downtown. They had to go to Williamsburg. And that quickly, the same thing happened again. They got squeezed out, and they had to go to Bushwick and everywhere. So that's unfortunate. But if you caught it, you caught it. If you were there and you were able to have fun, experience it at that time, it was a real special place. It's so different now. It's unbelievable. Such is life, Things change. Yeah. But it's pretty cool down here. It's like a lot of artists, I don't know I remember when the Wynwood scene popped off not more than about 10 years ago when, I can't remember the name of that developer that literally brought up buildings to have Keith and Kenny. What was
Jessica Goldman? I think it was our
Tony Goldman, thank you. Tony Goldman, who had also did a lot developing Soho, but he was really a friend to artists and would help make it happen in a more of a, manageable, affordable way, and he supported the arts in a sincere way. But now, Wynwood is a whole different thing, right? It changes.
Different now.
Things change, so.
You got one last one in you? Or?
I'm good.
You good?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick, new hip hop. Do you listen to new hip hop, and if so, who?
Well, I like lyrical guys that have real command of lyrics. I'm always bad with names whenever I'm asked on the spot, but obviously Kendrick, J. Cole, guys that really make sense with lyrics. Some of the other guys that people call mumble, I don't really go there. I'll listen if it's unique and interesting, but I come from an era, and I think it's really important, and I think it's going to go back to that, where all the artists were completely distinguishable from the other ones. And it was like, I do not, even though your friends may say, yo, you sound just like so-and-so beat, that's dope. That's not gonna cut it. So the artists that really are unique and doing unique things with their sound and their flow and everything, I like that. And if it catches my ear, I'm locked in. And typically, if I meet people that are interesting, because everything is so different now, I go, send me some links so I can hear what's popping, what they're making and stuff like that. And so that's how I like to do it.
Thank you. You okay? No, let's we got one.
You got a question? Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Actually, there was one other question other than me, but I actually had a question based off of what Unique asked. I'm from New York, and then like what you just based off you answered like is so totally different. Like my question really is like, how do us as artists from New York, or just anywhere in the world, right? Anywhere in the U.S., but more or less like from the city, how do we navigate these new terrains of being in the city now that things are so different? How do we activate them? How do we really do what you did? Do it, do what everyone has done before us, more or less. So.
Well, it's a different landscape now completely. I guess one of the good things, but also could be the bad things, is about like this addiction to being online. Things don't often have a chance to really develop. Sometimes when I reflect back to the way hip hop got to develop, it was a good 10 years of just people just doing it because they wanted to, it wasn't trying to be a star, it wasn't trying to be rich, it was about, I'm trying to be the #1 cat in my area, in my projects, on my block. I'm trying to be that dude. And those roots, I think, went way down deep, which allowed the culture of hip hop to stand so strong, and I think about that. But I think sometimes man, if you were able to hold back from posting and putting that little thing on blast right away, which may get a lot of hits and links and likes, it kind of sometimes dissipates, I think, the energy really quickly, as opposed to you really took some time to develop this shit, you made mistakes, you went in and fixed it, and now it's so strong. I mean, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to, I think it's hard to resist, like, I gotta post this shit now, you know what I mean? Because it's out there sometimes a bit too soon, Like when you're making art in your studio, you don't want to put everything on blast right away a lot of times. You look at the way most artists work. I don't think too many want to. But if you do, some do, because they're just trying to get on and trying to get a bag, you know what I'm saying? They're trying to get at that money, which is whack to me if that's your primary motivation. But if you have the ability and the discipline to just like ease up, I think that's an important factor to help things really develop. There's things that have popped off and gotten exposed sometimes too early. Somebody might do a new dance thing. It might be something that's really interesting, and it gets drained really soon. And then somebody will hit these cats with a bag, and they just lose their mind sometimes. It's not easy to navigate that, and that's difficult. But if you can and you've got something good, I think it could be beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amen on that. Thank you. You good? Thank you. Thank you.
Franklin.
Thank you. Thank you all. Fab.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.